very much, Noel. It's a pleasure, as always, to be sharing and working with you on a particular platform such as this. I have been a participant and an invitee and a speaker at a number of MacGill schools going back a long time, and it's an honour and a renewed pleasure to be here again. And for those of you who have been here for the first time, or who have been here and not explored the delights of this particular town, I would invite you, if you haven't so done, to explore the wonderful architecture of the new modern church, the Catholic Church, designed by Liam McCormick. It is a testimony to how rich you can design a spiritual space without the bling of the Celtic tiger. Go and visit it, sit there, contemplate, pray if that's your orientation or your predisposition. But in Liam McCormick, who is perhaps Ireland's most eminent modern ecclesiastical architect, you have in this particular town a pure gem of craftsmanship, of economy, and of sheer spiritual delight. And I just made my own little spiritual visitation to it, as I always do when I come here, because it reminds me of the genius that is part of this part of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, the talk and topic that we have to discuss tonight is: what are the economic consequences of a no vote if we vote on the 2nd of October, once again, no to Lisbon? The simple answer to that, quite frankly, is nobody knows. You can't measure it, you can't smell it, you can feel it, you can think about it, but we don't know. And I'm going to try and take you through that agnostic sense of worry and fear that I have, and to be honest with you. Where are we starting from? In March 1997, on the 50th anniversary, or 2007 I should say, on the 50th anniversary of the Treaty of Rome, the leaders of the then 27 member states of the European Union, meeting in Berlin, and our then Taoiseach Bertie Ahern represented the Republic of Ireland at that gathering. Indeed, Minister, you might have been there yourself, I'm not sure. And they issued a declaration at the end of that, which I will read to you, because I want to set their declaration in the context of what the consequences of a no vote might happen to be, should we take that course of action in a couple of months' time. With all the kind of language that Noel Dore would have been a participant in drafting many years ago, they declared the following: with European unification, a dream of earlier generations has become a reality. Our history reminds us that we must protect this for the good of future generations. For that reason, we must always renew the political shape of Europe in keeping with the times. That is why, 50 years after the signing of the Treaties of Rome, we are united in our aim of placing the European Union on a renewed common basis before the European Parliament elections of 2009. For we know that Europe is our common future. We weren't able to meet that timetable of before the European elections 2009. Not because the Czechs hadn't ratified it, or because the Poles were messing about with it, or because the Constitutional Court in Germany was second-guessing the decisions of the Bundestag and the Bundesrat in relation to their interpretation of it, but because we had decisively said in 2008, no. So we didn't meet that deadline. And 500 million people had to turn around, having gone through a process since the collapse of the Berlin Wall, which we will be celebrating, or commemorating, in my view celebrating, some months later this year. 20 years in effect, but 10 hard years of negotiation, of constitutional building. How do you make fit for purpose an organisation that originally started with 6 and now has 27 and possibly could have 35? How do you make this kind of new system work? And that's what the debate has been about, because there has been no, let me say it, there has been no transfer of solemn sovereign powers from the Republic of Ireland or from any other republic or from any other kingdom to the pool of treaties that make up the European Union in terms of what it might do in the future. This is all about constitutional governance, as Angela has rightly said. And the other 495 people are going to say, in my view, a bit like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, as they were being pursued relentlessly across the far west, who are these guys? Who are the Irish? Who is this island that, for those of you, and I spent 4 hours in it today, the Ulster Folk Museum outside Omagh, where 2 centuries of desolation and poverty resulted in an exodus of 2 million people from the province of Ulster to North America because of the consistent and perennial failure of the people of this island to make this island work. So who are those guys who said no in 2001 to Nice 1 and who have said no in 2008 to Lisbon and who possibly might say no next October? Now, the Minister for Foreign Affairs has done a good job, in my view, and his colleagues in government, in getting the guarantees and the assurances for us within the framework of treaty making to address the fears that were revealed in the focus groups and the surveys that were done in relation to why people voted no. And as Angela has rightly said, there was a lot of hubris. There was a lot of, we are the Celtic tiger. We can do no wrong. We can send a stuffed turkey to the Eurovision, and we can believe in our own rhetoric. I think those days are now over. But it has to be said that the tolerance and the understanding that Micheál and Brian Cowan and others got on our behalf as citizens of this republic is a tolerance that has a very short shelf life. I would not like to have had to make the arguments that Micheál had to do in private, and I know he had to do them. I've been involved in 2 presidencies as a minister in an Irish government. And the difference about the European Union and European politics and national politics is something that you don't understand until you actually get into it. In Irish politics, there's them and there's us. Those Fianna Fáil bastards on the one hand and us saints on the other. You know your enemy. You know who your opponent is. There's a clear division. And you mobilise the energy and the tribes and the history and the remember this and so on and so forth. In the European politics, of which Micheál and Michael and others, and Noel Dore and so many people have been involved in it, there is no them. There's just us. There is no them, there's just us. And we argue on the us that we can persuade, and the us that we have to bring along, and the us that will enable all of us to move together. You can't whip a vote in the European Parliament. You can't introduce a guillotine in the European Parliament. You can't do what successive governments, and I've been parts of them, so I'm not being part of them. I'm talking about the Irish culture that you are familiar with, and the European culture which nobody within Europe, other than those people who have been involved in it, are familiar with it. So you have to persuade, you have to cajole, you have to charm, you have to talk, you have to enthuse, you have to reach out, you have to be something that we are actually brilliant at. The Irish do politics particularly well. That fool, Kilroy Silk, made some disparaging comment about an Irish president. And the Spectator magazine, of all magazines, castigated him on the basis that there is not just one Irish president. There are, in fact, 3, and there are 4 Irish prime ministers. President Chaim Herzog, President Reagan, President Robinson, Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, the Prime Minister in New Zealand, and Prime Minister Keating in Australia. Now, that didn't happen by accident. That wasn't programmed. We're good at doing this kind of thing. And people like Noel Dore, and David O'Sullivan, and others that you've heard, and many others whom you don't know of, who are the people who are the deal makers and the people who can facilitate political change amongst the us in a diverse community, of which we were all voluntary members. Nobody forced Malta to join the European Union. No army of diplomats rolled over, as in September 1939, and said to Poland, "You have to join." This is a voluntary union. And each country decided, yes, this bit of my sovereignty I will share with the rest of you on terms and conditions and rules and procedures that we will engage in, provided that you recognise there is no them, we're all us. Now, what we have done when we said no to Lisbon I is to say, yeah, there's us, but we are special us. We are special us, and we have concerns. And therefore, we are saying to that Berlin Declaration, no, you cannot move forward to create the new kind of institutional procedures that you want to construct for yourselves, because we, the Irish, have concerns about conscription to a European army. Hands up, those of you who know where the European army is. Or no, you cannot say that you want to move forward because the Irish are concerned we're going to have abortion imposed on Ireland. Now, Micheál has done a good job in coming back, and Angela has talked about it. The guarantees. How do you give a guarantee? And ask how this man, a professional, good, experienced diplomat, had to go into rooms and say, please give me a guarantee that something that is not in the treaty will not actually happen anyway. What kind of a mission was it to send any representative, either a professional diplomat or an elected office holder of this republic, to go into the privacy of those rooms and say, I want a legal understanding or a guarantee? Things that were not in the treaties, we had to say they really are not in the treaties. Now, I'm conscious of time, and I hope your coughing is still good and all, so please feel free to cough. Please feel free to cough. So what are the economic consequences of a no vote? As I said at the outset, I'm agnostic on that point. I don't know. But two things will happen instantly. When it is declared, if it happens, it will have an immediate effect in the commercial and investment boardrooms and commentaries right around the globe. It will be on the wires before it's printed in the Financial Times or in the Wall Street Journal or anywhere else. And those countries who are now looking at Barack Obama and his decision to remove the tax shelter facilities and the tax haven facilities for a lot of US companies, and those companies who are saying we have to get out of here, there and everywhere, maybe we should go to Ireland, because Ireland was never a tax haven and is not a tax haven. And I say that as a former Minister for Finance. We never allowed brass plate, what was called brass plate operations. And many of them, incidentally, are looking at Ireland at the present time, removing themselves from other venues around the world in order to stay on the right side of Congress when they eventually come through with some compromise. A no vote declared on the 3rd of October, I believe, would take Ireland off that list of possible countries. I can't be sure. I use the phrase I believe, but I think that's the sort of thing that would hit the wires. As I said, we have said no to the European project on 3 separate occasions in recent times, or 2 separate occasions, we might say it a third time. Now, the difference about saying no in this occasion is we're not opting out of a project that other people want to go along with. We're not saying, okay, if you want the single currency, or if you want the Schengen Agreement, or if you want NATO, or if you want a common foreign defence security policy, if you want to be proactive in these areas, go ahead and do it, but we, the Irish, for our reasons, and we are a sovereign republic, we don't want to go along with that. But the rest of you can do that. That's okay with us. And the Swedes have said that in relation to the currency. Danes have done so. We've done so in relation to Schengen and a whole lot of other things. But it doesn't stop the train. It doesn't stop the train. It just says, look, we're moving to the last carriage, and we're not going to move into that. But if we say no to Lisbon, we're saying to that Berlin Declaration and to that whole group of people and politicians who invested an enormous amount of their time and energy in trying to construct, to use Angela's phrase, a European polity that is fit for purpose. Fit, for example, to talk to the Russians about energy, so that they don't again turn off the tap of gas running through the Ukraine or running through Georgia. Fit so that we can negotiate with the Chinese on climate change. Fit so that we can negotiate for Irish farmers in relation to agriculture. And how do we move from the kind of problems of agricultural economy and fishing in this part of the global world and maintain a standard of living decent for our people and all the suppliers and people associated with it, and at the same time recognise international market forces, so that we in turn, if we get the deal on Doha, can sell the thing that farmers' children and farmers' grandchildren are capable of selling, which is state-of-the-art international financial services, state-of-the-art intellectual property type products, which is the product of our investment in education over the last 30 years. Doha has two sides. The one side that you hear of is the farmers shouting and roaring, and they're entitled to shout and roar. What you don't hear is that Doha will open up the services market of the world to the Irish economy. And the Irish economy is a smart economy. Its future is in that territory. We're not steel bashers. We're not car manufacturers. We're not shipbuilders. We are smart people who can actually sell services internationally in an international language in which we have 5 Nobel Prize winners. 1% of the 500 million people approximately whose mother language is English, and we have a command and a control of that language in this country, which you celebrated last year with Brian Friel. That's the other side. That's your grandchild's side, not your grandfather's hill farm side. And that's what is open to us. If we say no, I don't know what ultimately the economic situation is going to be. But the people who were around Berlin last year, or 2 years ago now, their grandchildren were there when the Soviet tanks rolled into Berlin. They were there when Spain collapsed. They were there when Greece collapsed. They were there when Latvia was part of the Soviet Union. They've had their own histories. We've no monopoly of misery in terms of our European experience. In fact, our misery is pretty small beer relative to what some of them went through. And if you think that they're going to say, hey guys, we can't move forward to make this union work because 5 million people on an island off the west coast of Europe have said that they don't want to go ahead. They'll respect us, they like us, they do like us, but we're not going to put a stop to their march. There's a wonderful monument at the top of a common street. Charles George Parnell. No man has a right to say, thus far shalt thou go, and no further. Do you seriously think that we, the Irish people, in the Republic of Ireland, can say to the rest of European citizens, thus far shalt thou go, and no further? They'll respect the treaties, it will be done in law, there won't be a shot fired, there'll be angry voices perhaps, but nothing that will stop them from moving forward. I can't chart that path as to how and why and in what way it will actually unfold. But at the end of the day, we will end up, I believe, being asked, are you with us? It's a bit like a relationship where ultimately you've got to the point where you really have to redefine how you're going to live together. And when that ultimate point comes, in my view, we will be asked, in whatever form it will emerge, and Noel will be more capable of devising the diplomatic route that would take us to that point. But the point will arrive where someone like Micheál Martin will be asked, well, why don't you, if you can't come with the rest of us, stop us from moving on forward? And you'll still be part of the family, but you'll be like Norway. You'll be paying your subscription to the club, but you'll have no benefits of membership of the club. You will be using the euro, but you won't have a seat at the central bank in Frankfurt. You will have to take on all the new rules that we will impose for the European Union, but you won't have a Minister for Consumer Affairs, or you won't have a Minister for Agriculture, or you won't have anybody else around those tables to put the voice of Irish concerns into the decision that would ultimately emerge. That's the ultimate logic, it seems to me, politically, of the choice of a no vote. We cannot put a stop to the march of the European aspiration declared in Berlin. We have to decide, do we want to be part of it? And if we're not wanting to be part of it, which is what a no vote would signal to me, then we have to, like a slow driver in a tight road, move into the slow lane and let those people who want to move forward, in all decency, let them move on ahead. And we'll try and keep up with them. You know, and I finish on this point. This country, going back to the Folk Museum, finally got its independence, or a part of it, in 1921. The first 40 years of the experience of the Free State Irish Republic was an economic, social and political disaster. Read Professor Lee if you want to get the detail on that. Listen to the veterans of 1916, Sean Lemass and others, who came to that conclusion themselves, on both sides, on all sides. They made their first application, realizing that the Sinn Féin option just didn't work. There were 2 countries losing population in 1961 across the whole of Europe. The German Democratic Republic of East Germany and the Republic of Ireland. Check it out. Ask yourself why. Who was fleeing from what and for what reason? Those people, that generation, decided back to the drawing board, we'll start again. They applied for membership to the European Union in a different world, in a different time. It took 12 years from 1961 until January 1, 1973 for us to become a member. And we're now a member of just over 30 odd years. What have we learnt in that period of time? What has been our experience? Have we been conscripted? Have we been forced to fight imperial wars? Has abortion been imposed upon us? Has civil divorce been imposed from Brussels? Have all of the things that people have said that we would lose been imposed upon us? And have we in fact been impoverished by the imperialistic nature of the neoliberal conspiracy that is the European Union? You make your own judgment on that. And then make a judgment, for those of you that have the vote, what choices would you like your children and your grandchildren to have? I know the ones that I want for my grandchildren. Thank you.